so let's move on to item 10. So I think...
Happy to move, Madam Chair.
I want to give Member Brown an opportunity to raise any issues that he wished to within the context of this one. So remembering this is just a submission, but I just thought we might see if there's anything Member Brown wished to raise. So Safine or Ian, did you want to make any preliminary comments? It's pretty straightforward.
Great idea, should be more than 1,000.
Through the Chair, I just thought I would take the opportunity to clarify what litter is defined as in the Litter Act to adhere with that understanding.
Do you want to just lean or bring your thing a little bit forward? Thank you.
So in the Litter Act 1979, litter includes any refuse, rubbish, animal remains, glass, metal, garbage, debris, dirt, filth, rubble, ballast, stone, earth, or waste matter or any other thing of a like nature. There's no volume given, so it does encompass anything from a cigarette butt through to a trailer load of dumping.
Ah, okay. So I think that picks up Member Brown's point, although litter doesn't do justice to some of the stuff you've dealt with. So Member Brown, do you want to ask?
Yes, thank you. And thank you for the report. It's very disheartening insofar as 1,600 plus investigations, 67 fines and 2 prosecutions per annum at a return of $8,500 and a cost of what looks like at least $1 million per annum. So that's not sustainable insofar as like when all of the scrutiny is going on things like the LTP and the disciplines that council laws encumber upon themselves around responsible expenditure. So can I just suggest that, one, I'm very heartened to see that the committee is engaged in the submission process, but two, can I go back to what I first asked around and accepting that the Litter Act is the framework from which prosecutions occur when waste and the rules are breached. And so, in the submission, so $400 for a fine, is the intent of the submission, because it looks like it's going to go to $1,000, is that what it's, and where is our principles, if not our rationale, around any increase and what that level increase should be? I haven't actually read the full draft of the submission. That may well be in there, but so...
Yep, so through the Chair, the bill proposes to increase the maximum infringement fee, so it's the maximum fee for littering from the current 400 to 1,000. The draft submission which we have prepared supports the Members' Bill but advocates for the scope of amendments to be widened to include education, evidence requirements and offender identification, and that's in line with the priority action that we've just spoken to on the Waste Management and Minimisation Plan. So our submission, whilst it supports looking at the Litter Act, we are advocating for a wider review of that document to ensure that its application as a whole is reviewed, not just the fines.
Thank you, and I do apologise, I have read through the legal context on the evidence level base of, if you were, any amendment to the current practice. So I do accept that the level of evidence, or there should be categories of that around the determination of somebody throwing a packet of rubbish versus somebody dumping a truckload of industrial waste, whatever it is. But then there should be comparably a fiscal relationship to that breach and that outcome. So, do you have a comment on that?
Yep. So the fine schedule is in terms of infringement fees, but the Litter Act does allow for prosecutions, which has a larger fine attached to it, and I think in some cases potentially there's other aspects to it as well through that prosecution.
Yeah, because I just can't see, no matter what the number is, Madam Chair, at the fine layer of that spread right across the city, going to $1,000, how that in any way, shape or form makes that look more attractive to us to continue on perpetuating what's going on. So, last question. Is it a bylaw then that council could look at a future point that focuses in, if you were, on the localness, i.e. Category and fiscal penalties?
Probably not, because the Litter Act exists. I'm not sure I'm fully understanding the question, to be honest.
I just got no confidence in the national appetite versus the Auckland cost. So I'm looking for the Auckland solution to its own problems as much as participating in the national grid.
I guess on that, the Waste Management and Minimisation Plan has outlined litter and illegal dumping as a priority for us, and that priority is focused on prevention, with this Litter Act being a part of that overall. It's a tool as part of that strategy, and it has to work together, education and enforcement, not one on its own, and I guess that's Auckland's approach to it currently.
Thank you.
So in the context of this, which is just our submission, we're going to, ask politely, can we charge more? But in working with perhaps the chair of our regulatory and our deputy mayor, we might work out how we can strengthen our own Auckland-based response to this. Thank you. Did you want to, Councillor Cashmore?
So I've been quite hot on this one, because a lot of the dumping, and Member Brown is quite correct, some of it is commercial dumps, particularly of tyres and batteries. They're going to places $5 to take a tyre away. Instead of taking it to a recycling plant, they just tip it down the gorge or over the hill or wherever into the nearest bush block. So that is commercial dumping, and there's a $20,000 fine plus for that. We can, if we catch them, very hard to catch tyres. So the solution for that is product stewardship, and that's got to be done nationally. And it's a bit more challenging. But for the person who just throws stuff out their car window, Macca's boxes, it's every day. It's just happening all the time. So again, the container deposit scheme's a partial answer for that as well, because when you and I were kids, James, you got 2 cents a bottle, didn't we? You might be not old enough to remember, but I remember that. 4 was it? I was a bit young, but older than you, Councillor, so maybe it was only 2 in my time. But so that's a way to solve that problem. But the challenge is, again, that's national legislation. But as far as when you're actually catching perpetrators of fly tipping and littering, can we not, through this process or another one, argue for having people through the Crimes Act or through the Mischievous Behaviours Act be made to pick up rubbish for 8 hours on a Saturday for 6 weeks?
Probably not through this
Not through this
legislation.
one, yep. So I've been challenging the Minister to have a crack at this, but
That's partly what we've got in our draft submission, is actually looking at
Other solutions.
the other solutions, or also identifying an offender. Currently, for the likes of your example, where someone might throw a cigarette butt out of the car window, it's not the same as a traffic infringement.
No.
We have to identify the actual offender, not the person who owns the vehicle, and perhaps having that discussion with the Minister through this bill might provide other tools through this legislation to do that.
it's quite often on the black bags, there's people being throw out envelopes and things like that in with them. So again, wasn't there. So, but it's a challenging area, and there's no two ways about that. But it's something you've got to tackle nationally. I know we're going to try and do at the conference this year, bit of a crack at it. Good to have a nationwide response to the government and say, we all want this to happen. Please, let's make a change for the better for our environment.
Indeed. Yep, as you say, it's coming up at the local government conference, and I think there's people are just
it's a
they've
real-
had guts full
It's a real
really
appetite for
at this stage. Yep. Okay. No more.
Excuse me, sorry.
Councillor
Madam
Simpson.
Chair, are we going to ask for people who are interested in speaking at the select?
Yep.
It's not me, by the way, but
So we just, I mean, I'm happy if someone else wants to do it. We just had tentatively put me, Councillor
sorry, I
Filipaina,
didn't see that. I was just reading. Sorry.
But if anyone
Glasses off,
else
glasses off.
is desperate
No,
Feel
sorry,
free.
it's there, that's fine,
It's there.
that's fine. I
Okay.
didn't, I was looking at my agenda, I wasn't looking at the drip.
If it's in
Apologies.
Auckland, I might vote.
Yeah, be good to have a team. You know, if people want to kind of come and join the clan, feel free to do that. Okay, and we will pick up and strengthen the issues that have been raised. All right, I will move that, or if
Second that.
someone... Yep,
Or move it.
seconded. You, councillor Walker will move, and I will second. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Against, carried. Thank you. I know people might be wanting a break. Please feel free individually if you do need to grab a cuppa, but I think we will just plough on. Our next item, item 11, is the Sport and Rec Community Access Scheme. Welcome, Dave.
Madam Chair,
It's
I'm happy
pretty
to move this
clear.
item.
We've just got a couple of changes, councillor Fletcher. We've got recommendation number 2, councillor Simpson and I were suggesting we make it 2 years, so to change that to 2020, which just puts Auckland Netball at the same level as the others. And councillor Hills is moving an amendment, or if, I'm very happy, if you're happy to move all 3 of them, councillor Fletcher,
I second, please,
by way of
Madam Chair.
addition. Or would you like to move all 3 of them, councillor Simpson?
If possible, I'd like to move my amendment.
You'd like to move yours, all right, darling? Sorry, darling.
Okay, Mum.
I think someone should get
Deep
the
breath.
chair a cup of tea.
It's been a long day already. Sorry, my first thing was that I was 7 this morning. Right, let's deal with the first 2 first. We'll deal with 1 and 2. Councillor Fletcher, are you happy with 1 and 2?
Yes, I am, and I'm particularly happy with the decision to move it to
Lovely.
2 years in
And
light of the challenges to netball.
Lovely. Councillor Simpson, you're happy to move those. I don't think we need any great discussion. Councillor Cooper?
Oh, some questions, Madam Chair,
Yep.
because if this was 1 year to review inequities, why would you then make it longer? So I'm quite concerned because when I look at it, I want some information about what netball right across the region is getting now. I think we should be getting beyond, I want one for mine and I want one for mine, I want one for mine. I want to know the whole picture because I'm not on Councillor Casey's committee, so I don't get that, and I would like to know before I just carte blanche give more money away, kind of a bit blindly. I just don't think it's responsible.
I'll get Councillor Hills to talk to number 2. With number 1, there was a little bit of inequity when some of these decisions were made. Auckland Netball has proved absolutely their delivery, and the staff have no problem with all of the grants were for 3 years, but for some reason 1 or 2 of them were just for 2. The staff have said it's absolutely appropriate for Auckland Netball to catch up with the others and then all
All
be
be done at the same
dealt
time.
with when we've completed our policy looking at equitable distribution.
So, okay, so the other question, if you don't mind, Madam Chair, is
Sure.
all netball across the whole region currently getting equitable funding right across the region as per numbers and visits? That's what I want to know, because if this is just a patch up, and it's no disrespect to the committee or the decision, but I haven't got the information in front of me and I don't know. And so that's why this seems very out of context. And the other committee may have had that, but it's come here to approve it, so
It's facility investment plan.
I don't, you know.
Okay. I don't want to put Dave on the spot because the recommendations were in the light of some extra information that Auckland Netball made available by way of the shared delivery that they've proven they are delivering to a slightly wider range than just
Variety, martial
netball.
arts, cheerleading.
This is not Northern Netball, it's Auckland.
This is Auckland Netball.
So that's not the regional body then, that's going, it's to Auckland
you-
City.
did you
That's what
want
I
to
want to
comment?
understand. This is, because all
Yep.
I've been sent
Yep.
is that criteria, that doesn't help me, doesn't give me any information.
Understand.
Yeah.
Can I help? It's not just netball. Auckland
the
Netball is not
presentation
just netball.
Okay,
Just saying.
why don't we
I
just
wanna
take a
hear
breath?
from
I thought it might be clearer than it is. See, lesson number 1, never rush a good process, always take the time. Dave, would you like to unpack this for us a little bit more?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think we understand that the purpose of the community access scheme is to open up facilities that aren't council managed. So it's to open up these facilities to broader reach into the community, to have more flexible facilities that people come and use. Excuse me. The reason that the 2 one-year terms were passed in May last year was because those 2 facilities predominantly dealt with a single code that were using them, as opposed to the rest of the facilities that were for multiple codes. The thinking at the time was we would wait for the sport facility investment plan that's under development to come back and be adopted by council, and we could look at and review these 2 facility grants that we have through that lens to make sure that they're appropriate. That piece of work will help address some of the inequities that we have around the region in terms of sport investment. The performance of both these 2 facilities, the Sovereign Stadium and Auckland Netball, has been very good. However, to the point that was made, there isn't a equitable investment across all the netball facilities around the region. This grant to Auckland Netball came from a legacy Auckland City Council agreement around the supporting of the operations of that facility, but the point is fair around there is still inequity in investment in netball, but also other codes as well.
Okay. So Madam Chair, the report that comes back talk about, because not all the facilities we netball played are council run, they might be on council underlying land with facilities owned by the code on top. So will we be looking at that code and doesn't matter where they operate, how that works? Will that be somehow available in that sports plan that you're talking about, facilities plan?
Through the Chair.
Because we're just talking about non-council run facilities here.
Through the Chair, I believe that the sport facility investment plan will be brought back to this committee in the coming months shortly. However, my understanding is it will address broadly the way council invests into sport and recreation facilities, looking at inequities we have between codes, but potentially providing guidance on how we invest.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm comfortable that we're going to do that work and that the anomalies will be ironed out soon. Thank you.
Awesome, good questions. Councillor Simpson, did you want to comment on this? No? You're all good? Okay. Councillor Filipaina.
Questions first, is it?
Questions.
Thank you, Chair. So, what is the process in regards to getting, especially with 3? I mean, I'm assuming 3 is still going to be put up and included into the recommendations, Chair?
Yep.
So what is the normal process for this to happen?
So I would take the staff off the hook because this was a political request, and I will get Councillor Hills to talk to this.
Okay. Is that okay?
Yeah, look, I'm going to throw in Papakura, I'm going to throw in Mangere, I'm going to throw in Counties Manukau Netball, I'm going to throw in a few others as well. But look, I'm always willing to listen, but I just think that we're circumventing the process. But hey, look, I'm open.
I guess there's a few.
All ears.
My issue on North Harbour Netball is for 6 years on the local board requested every single year to look at inequities, why Netball North Harbour doesn't get any operational funding when, say, Auckland Netball gets 150. Continually the same thing come back. Yes, we're working on it, we'll look at it. Yes, we're working on it, we'll look at it. Through the local board, we funded things several times. They have up to 420,000 visitors a year. The gates are open completely at all times. They pay for their own toilet cleaning, rubbish, everything. But they sit adjacent to rugby and cricket fields who get their rubbish taken away, toilets cleaned, their lawns mowed, lines painted, all by council funding every single year. So we've got right next door
the, I guess, male-dominated sports are getting everything paid for through council operating funding. Over there, just because netball is not grass, I guess, they don't get any operating funding from us. I asked again last year, the 28,000 we're talking about was part of the community access scheme as a historical legacy agreement through Hato Petera. I asked, well, at least the least we could do was keep that within the same, they're literally next door to each other, basically in the same local board, but also on the same road almost, in the same sort of sports precinct. That grant was ended, and I said, could we look at, you know, ring fencing that for at least that area or for netball, because they've been presenting to us every year. The local board's done the same and presented on North Harbour netball for 7 years now. That never came back. We never made a political decision to reduce the fund. The fund was $1,023,000. We have only allocated $995,000. That still leaves the $28,000 sitting there. So we've never made a political decision to reduce the fund. So my point, yes, it's political, but a political decision around this table, but I believe that we should at least show some in-kind with that money. If we keep talking legacy, and I don't know why we're still talking legacy after 8 years, but obviously this policy is coming forward in the next few months, but this goes some way to at least acknowledging that North Harbour netball works the same as Auckland netball. Complete 24-hour access. You can go there and play tennis. They have holiday programs. Anyone can go use the courts when they're not being used for organised sport, just like our sports fields are. It's on council land, and they raise most of their money from the players and from trusts and gambling foundations, lotteries, ASB Foundation North, anyone who will give them money. But this is me trying to get to the bottom of an 8-year request that our local boards have all been putting funding towards. But yeah, so it is not a huge amount, but I still don't understand why if we are having this conversation in 2 months, why we're still giving Auckland netball 150,000 when other areas are not the same. But I don't know if the other netball centres around the city have been asking for this, but North Harbour netball have, and the local boards present on it every single year, because I was here for 6 of them doing that. Yeah, so it's an unallocated fund that came from the Kaipātiki local board space already. So I don't know. To me, it's helping with some fairness.
Where does the money come from?
From
Okay,
the fund.
so why don't we deal with 1 and 2 first,
Yep.
and then we'll deal with the third recommendation.
So-
Councillor Fletcher, was yours on 1 and 2? But
Yes, Madam Chair,
I'd
it
like us
was.
to come back to 3.
I must admit, I didn't intend speaking on this, but I just need to make a couple of points that the future is in partnerships, and I note that after this committee finishes, we will have a workshop on the sports facility investment plan. One of the difficulties we have, because of the wide brief in terms of reference for this committee, is that we have not really had sufficient time to come to grips with the large body of work that is necessary to actually take the legacy situation and bring it forward in an equitable way, but also in a way that reflects the partnerships that we will have in the future. So I can well understand the sensitivity around regional disbursement, but the reality is that we will never deal with that equitably until we can get the sports facility investment plan off the ground. So I'm looking forward to today's workshop. I thank you, Madam Chair, for facilitating that, and I hope that we can adopt 1 and 2 because this is really in the spirit of previous agreements that we've had in the absence of the wider regional sports facility investment plan. So it's just a holding position, and I'm hopeful that, in fact, I'd welcome perhaps any signal that you might give us as to when you see that investment plan coming back to this committee.
Yeah, I might check with the staff on the time frame, but Councillor Fletcher, you raise a really good point. Now that we've got some of our other macro plans out of the way, we're digging right into sport open space, green space and playgrounds, and looking at regional equity and the process for delivering that. And I have a series of workshops that we're, Councillor Filipaina and myself, are planning to take councillors through this complex and critical work. So it's going to be, this is the big focus for the next few months now in this area. So just the sports facilities investment plan timeframe, do we have a timeframe for that, or is that what we're going to be discussing at the workshop that we may or may not get to if this meeting ever ends? August? Coming back in August.
Terrific. So I
Awesome.
hope that we can support 1 and 2.
Lovely. Okay. So any other discussion on 1 and 2, and then we'll deal with 3 separately. Councillor Darby.
Thank you. Just on 1 and 2, not the amendment. And
Yep, we're
I
just on
support
1 and 2.
Councillor on the amendment. So just on the so-called Sovereign Stadium, I understood that whole complex is called AUT Millennium or AUT Millennium Centre,
Yeah.
and the stadium is part of it. So that's the first question. Can I have some clarification? In paragraph 14, it refers to 30,000 community visits. At paragraph 20, there are total of 40,000 users, which suggests that other than community visits, which are assumedly, you know, the ones that over and above the core business, there's only another 10,635. And then I go to the school visits, 60 plus schools, 10,000 children. And I'm quite confused by these numbers. And I guess my core question is, has anybody really interrogated the numbers that come through from AUT Millennium to understand it rather than just re-report those numbers? And at the outset, and it's not reported here, it is reported in paragraph 15, at the outset, is there any understanding of the capital that Auckland Council's predecessor, North Shore, put into the centre, and were there any caveats on that capital that may have secured access anyway?
Through the chair, just in regard to the numbers to begin with, paragraph 14 refers to the average use through time. So that's been historic, I guess. Paragraph 20 is the interim reporting received from the first half of this financial period, which reports, I guess, a significantly higher community use, which is reflecting positive uptake of that community access that we're purchasing. In regard to the ownership of the facility, so the AUT Millennium Trust obviously takes in a much wider facility. This investment that we have is solely for the use of the Sovereign Stadium component and not for the broader facility.
So it's just the athletics track?
The athletics track and the grass surface in the middle of it.
So it's not for the pool and it's not for the gym?
That's correct.
None of that? It's just for the athletics track?
Okay. Thank you, councillor.
Sorry, do
Ed,
we
you
not
wanna
pay, do we not
follow that up?
secure public access to the pool? I thought we secured public access to the pool through a, under the same arrangement.
I don't have the detail in front of that. In front of me. I'm sorry. My understanding is any access to the pool.
Rob's got the information.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, in our investment into the Sir Owen Glen National Aquatic Centre, we did have a funding agreement which is separate to this one around that access. So there's 2 different agreements with the AUT Millennium. So yes, we do, but it's separate.
And we're not dealing with that today, we're just dealing with this one. Okay, that's good, thank you.
Okay, cool. Councillor Fletcher? No, you're done. We didn't. Any other questions on 1 and 2? Councillor Hills?
My question is, if we're extending the netball to 2020, it kind of doesn't make sense, the last decision, which was to only give it the extra year to wait for the plan, then we're skipping another year forward. So I'm just a bit confused. So we're going to get the plan next month, but then we've already said that the plan doesn't really matter because we'll still allow Auckland Netball to have 150 for 2 years. I'm not opposed to it, but I'm just still confused of the equity discussion, the point that there was only a 1-year extension was because we were waiting for the plan. The plan's coming next month, but we're going to give 2 years instead of 1. So,
Yeah, so the thinking was simply to bring it in line with all of the other, you know, the same issues
Review
can be
process be
asked
the
of each of those other recipients, and it simply rolls everybody else over at the same time. Did you want to?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, you may want to consider, if that's the logic and we agree with that logic, whether the first should be moved to 2020 as well, so that everybody's in the same.
Oh, AUT,
Yeah,
so,
everybody's in the same rotation.
so we have all of our
Yep.
current recipients of the Access scheme, everyone is at 2020. They all roll over or not in the light of the report when it comes back to us. And at that stage, should 3 go through, we would obviously reinterrogate 3 as well. Okay? We're getting a little bit of clarity?
That's consistent.
Okay, so that's 1 and 2 both move to 2020. So I'm quite keen that we deal with that one, and then we move to Councillor Hills and Councillor Darby's recommendations separately. So I might put 1 and 2, I'll put those. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Sorry,
So let's
Madam
move-
Chair, point of order. Shouldn't the first be per annum as well, if it's all going to be on an
Yes.
equal footing? Just,
We'll just, I don't think that's a point of order, I think that's a piece of good advice.
Good spotting.
Good spotting. So let's now move to our amendment by way of addition. And Councillor Hills and Councillor Darby have done some good research, found out there's an underspend, and they are quite rightly saying, well, this is an area that's had a long-term need, the issue's been raised time and time again, why don't we apply it to Netball North Harbour and give it a crack? And that's their job as local councillors. Councillor Hills.
thank you, Chair, and I've already spoke to it, but I would, if possible, like it to extend to 2020 if that's what we're doing, if that's becoming the rule for everyone, then because otherwise then the discussion will be the same again, wouldn't it? Yeah,
Okay.
so the main points for me are that they've been clearly asking for 7 years, and I asked last time and got no feedback, and then the 28,000 was already in Kaipatiki, so I'm not taking it from anywhere else, it's just an underspend, and it goes to help that, if we're still working in Legacy, at least it goes to the same sports precinct area. I don't think 28,000 is anywhere near enough, but we still are waiting on this access policy. So I'd hope people would support it for those reasons.
Okay, right. Now, should we go, so back to Councillor Filipaina.
Chair, you know, I applaud the fact that both Councillor Hills and Councillor Darby's put up this, but I will not be supporting it. I think there is a process that needs to go through. That process is going to go through in August. And I think, you know, when we talk about legacy, we talk about equity. My problem I have with it is that we don't have the information around any of the other centres. For example, Counties Manukau based at Pullman Park. For example, I know that the Mangere o Tahuhu netball courts, I mean, you know, we just need to get that work in front of us first before making, and, you know, I mean, 28,000 may not sort of seem like a lot, but it's the process. Councillor Simpson always talks about a process and that we need to follow a process. At the moment, we're not following that process. Well, yes, we are, because it's the political decision, but we haven't, because we haven't had the information around all our other centres that may need, and look, that may need the money. I know the Mangere o Tahuhu netball centre, very small one. They still get teams across Tamaki, Makaurau, not to the numbers, but, you know, the local board have supported them as much as they can. So there's just no information from my perspective. It may have come through over the last 6-7 years, but we need to have a look at the whole region. So because of that, and then changing it to 2020, I will not be supporting that recommendation, the amendment. Thank you.
Okay, and I think councillors and members, this will simply be a vote. You either support it or you don't. Now, other speakers to this? Councillor Watson. So
Yeah.
rather than questions, I think we'll just take.
Well, it
yeah,
is a kind of a question
point.
because that's what's going to determine my vote. And I certainly agree with what Councillor Hills has said. Netball North Harbour is a wonderful facility that does make itself available to the public, both for netball and tennis during the summer. But I've heard a number of things here, and to be honest, I'm having a little difficulty following it all. Reference to Hato Petera, across the road school with largely rugby fields, I think also used for soccer. So I guess what I'm just seeking here is really clarification from the officers. So I've heard a very compelling case put up. I haven't seen it in black and white. I don't understand the nuts and bolts of it, but having this great sympathy for this particular venue, I just would seek from the officers just a little bit of assurance as to the various components here, which I found hard to follow because I haven't seen them spelled out anywhere. So are they able just to give us a bit of heads up on this? Because I'd rather hear it from the officers as opposed to just kind of general points.
I think, Councillor, the staff obviously are free to comment, but that was why I asked Councillor Hills to answer the question in the previous the previous round of questioning, because this is not part of the staff report.
No.
I'm sure if the staff are happy to answer, that's fine, but this is the research that Councillor Hills and Councillor Darby have done, and they've taken responsibility for that. So Dave or Rob, feel free to comment, but...
Through the chair, there was a process undertaken a little over 12 months ago, and the Hato Petera grant, alongside two others, were deemed out of scope for the community access scheme, hence why they are no longer funded under this. There was a reallocation of some of those funds, taking it to $995,000 invested in this last financial year. However, there still remains the gap of the $28,000 that Councillor Hills has referred to.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Okay,
Can I add?
good. No. I think let's just try and keep all the cross-discussion to a minimum. Councillor Darby and then Councillor Simpson.
Oh, look, just very briefly, I think the staff have given a brief account. It's actually called the Barfoot and Thompson Netball Centre because, you're really, in the absence of council backing up there, they've had to bring in a major sponsor. And good on Barfoot and Thompson. I think they also put some money into the Auckland Netball Centre, Barfoot and Thompson. But if you go and look at the website here, this centre is available for public access. If you go to the Auckland Netball Centre site, you don't see that same opening for public access. Here, you can go and hire a court for $12, anybody, and they think that's important. I mean, there is real, genuine public access at these courts. If you go to the Auckland Netball Centre, and good on them, but you will actually not see the same opening to just general public access. And it's all, look, it offers a great facility, but this, it's really interesting when you go up there and you see, I don't know how many courts I've got there, 20 courts or something. And then over the road, you've got the council spending tens of thousands of dollars mowing and preparing turfs for, rugby and cricket. It's just disproportionate. This is actually, in a way, it's a stopgap, and it's an urgent stopgap.
Thank you, Councillor. So I've got Councillor Simpson, Councillor Newman, and I will give Councillor Hills the right of reply, and then I think we need to deal with the recommendation. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a question, then a comment, if I may. So my question is, look, I suppose this is by way of presentation. It's a political ask, which doesn't have a process. So my question is, if this is lost, because it's just a random one-off political decision. When would it come up for a decision as part of a process that would be equitable across the region as per putting everybody in the same basket?
Through the chair, given the previous resolution, the grants would now be extended through to 30 June 2020. We will have the sport facility investment plan by that stage, and
So it'll come up in 2020.
And so, given the previous resolution, yes. So then, at that point, we would be making the decision to about how we go forward with this investment with a lens of equity.
Okay, and my second question is, Daryl Barfoot and Thompson, and it's not Auckland Netball Councillor, it's ASB Community Centre, who they sponsor as well. Would they be able to fund the 28,000? Has anyone asked that question?
That's not the point.
I think that's a separate.
But I'm just saying if it was got lost, because you know, this is a process issue. It's either a political
It
decision,
is.
we're randomly making a decision, or we're going to put it in the pot. And if we decide no, we should do due process and put it in with everybody else. I'm very keen to make sure that potentially somehow we could get it funded a different way. Has anyone looked at that?
We need to deal with our process today, and then the request for sponsorship money is a separate discussion. Councillor Newman.
I'm almost tempted to sort of ask for an exceptionalism for Netball Manurewa, to be honest. Oh, how I wish I could have the Barfoot and Thompson Netball Manurewa. That would be really nice. I think this is a very poor process. I absolutely respect the advocacy from the North Shore councillors, but I've got to go back and explain to the volunteers at Netball Manurewa who go and scrub the toilets each week and do all sorts of things, why I supported this, but I failed to put up an amendment for them. So I would like to think that we can actually go through a proper process of consideration rather than these exceptional recommendations which I don't think treat everyone fairly. In saying that, I hope that we can come up with an equitable process to address this, because it does seem to me to be a gap that needs to be resolved, and I think this needs to be resolved in a timely way. But you know, it's a very hard one when I have significant gaps in my ward. So I'm sorry, Richard, but I can't support this when this is the only Me Too that's going to be put up.
Okay. Right, I think we've had a good discussion. Anything to add, Councillor Hills, and then we'll put it to the vote.
Yeah, so I guess, and maybe I didn't, the frustrating thing for me is that this conversation last year I asked, and that is why we kept the 28,000. The other two grants people accepted, okay, cool, they can be put into other areas. The 28,000 was set aside because I asked, could we set aside that 28,000, and the officers said at the time, we will look at how we can get it into Netball North Harbour, because you're right, it's coming from somewhere in Kaipatiki, so it probably, because the rest of the legacy agreements, it should stay in Kaipatiki. So I waited and nothing came forward, and then again, we're sitting here and we're going to leave an underspend. So the fund is 1,023,000. We're gonna, with this decision, leave it at 995,000. So we're sitting there with a 28,000 underspend, when Netball North Harbour has continually asked for some support over 8 years. What we've done with that decision up the top there, we've pushed it into a different triennium, a different governing body. I probably wouldn't have supported that if I knew there would be opposition to my decision, I guess, because now we've pushed, what the officers told me and told us was, in a month's time we're going to have an access scheme to discuss. But actually none of us around this table are guaranteed to have that conversation, because we've pushed it into 2020
So why isn't all 9
to make a decision on how, after then 10 years of Auckland Council, that we're going to talk about equity and legacy grants, when North Harbour Netball comes to all our local boards, and at kind, the local boards are helping them out. So I'm just disappointed that we're going to sit here and vote down, we're going to leave a fund underspend instead of helping out a group that have their gates unlocked 24 hours a day. When this conversation last year, it was promised to me that we would look at how we'd get that 28,000 to North Harbour netball because it came out of Kaipātiki, and that's why it was left there. So I hope people can support this, not because it's random, but because it was brought up last time.
So that's their fault.
And it's been brought up time and time and again. The board has always had it as one of their top priorities. And as a local board member, we funded hundreds of thousands of dollars of replacement courts, operating funding. The board last year funded their building. But this has more visitors a year than the Auckland Zoo, 420,000 users. So, and we're gonna keep our fund underspent, and then we're not gonna be able to make a decision about it until the new governing body does in 2020. So that kind of doesn't make sense that we're having this sports fund come to us next month and then we can't make a decision. So, yeah, it's a shame.
All right. I think we should, the debate's been closed and we will put this to the vote. I'm going to ask all those in favour to please say aye.
Aye.
And those against to say no.
No.
Abstain.
Show of hands.
I think we might need,
Division.
Can we do a division, please?
if we have to.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a little bit unclear on those voices. Okay. Division.
Councillor Halls?
Aye.
Councillor Bartley?
What?
Member Blair? Member Brown?
Abstained.
Councillor Casey?
No.
Timia Cashmore?
Yes.
Councillor Cooper?
Yes, but I'd rather do it for 1 year, anyway.
You've got two up there.
Councillor Darby?
For.
Mayor Goff?
Yes.
Councillor Filipona?
Against.
Councillor Fletcher? Four. Councillor Hills?
Yes, please.
Councillor Mike Lee?
Abstain.
Councillor Newman?
No.
Councillor Sayers?
No.
Councillor Simpson?
No.
Councillor Stewart?
No.
Councillor Wayne Walker?
Yes.
Councillor Watson?
Yep.
Touch and go.
Thank you, everyone. That's awesome.
It's carried.
you.
Here we
Thank
go.
you. That was a
It's
challenging
quick process.
discussion. Now, because
gonna
there
look at
is,
the others anyway.
and
That's right, the mayor needs to make.
it's taken us right to 2 minutes before the mayor's
I support that.
meeting's
Serious.
reconvened.
Don't ask for my support.
So we will
Can
now.
I just remind through you, Madam Chair, members of the APR committee, we're reconvening the meeting that was adjourned on Thursday. Shouldn't take too long. You shouldn't go without lunch. But we're meeting in the ground floor boardroom immediately at the close of this meeting.
Okay, so should we adjourn for an hour? You think you will be finished that meeting, Mr.
I
Mayor?
think we'll get through quicker than that, so you might like to adjourn for 3/4.
Half an hour.
We'll adjourn for 45 minutes and see everybody back here. Thank you all.
You can do this meeting.